You are live, says my screen. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining me for this month's listening club, where we listen to Pimp a Butterfly by Kendrick Lamar, which was requested quite a bit, specifically by Tim and Miguel. So, really excited to have you guys on the call with us today. Just a little bit of housekeeping before we get started here. This is one of 3 multimedia clubs that we have at Dragonfly. We have our listening club. We also have a monthly movie club that will be meeting on Wednesday, the 31st, where we watched Millennium Actress. And I'm looking forward to that discussion. And we also have a quarterly book club that is meeting this month, but we're actually meeting on the 1st of August. And reread Werner Herzog's most recent memoir. And I usually put up a poll when we finish a book so that we can pick the next one, but I decided against that this time, mostly because I have the problem where people are very vocal about the books, like the books they want to read, and then they don't read them, and then it just ends up being a bunch of people that picked a different book. And I'm really looking forward to rereading the book I picked. So I will announce that, as well as our next movie and listening club picks on the 1st. I can see that somebody's watching. So I will go through this part that I usually skip over now, because we don't usually have many people that watch us live. Most people watch us on the replay, but if you are watching us live, you can participate in the discussion by adding a comment. If you comment on either Facebook or on YouTube, we do get that as a notification, so you can join the discussion with us live. If you're watching it on the replay, we still get a notification. It's just that it's a replay, so we can't respond in real time. I started this because I like talking about media. So I am always down to talk about this or any of our previous picks. They are all listed in our Facebook group, which I have put up on the screen here. We don't just do the media clubs. We also do a lot of other things. We have weekly artist calls. We do feedback calls on Monday nights so that you can come and show your work and get feedback and give feedback on the other members' work. You can add suggestions for media that we watch in the future. You can do that through the Facebook group. We also have live meetups if you're in the Los Angeles area, which is where we're based out of. And if you're not, you can always join us online for any of our meetings. It's also just a really great place to connect with other artists and things like that. It's a Facebook group. You can write a post. You can share news. And that will go out to a bunch of like-minded people.
Yeah, if you're not in the Facebook group, what are you doing?
If you like what we do, you can always support us on Patreon. We currently do not have any perks for Patreon members. Everything that we offer is available for free. We are talking about adding perks. Unsure when that will happen at some point in the future. But for right now, you can support us for as little as $2 a month, and that will help us keep doing what it is that we do. These clubs, our meetups, all of those kind of things, as well as maybe some future things. So with all that out of the way, let's talk about Kendrick Lamar. I always ask the question at the start of every meeting, but have you guys listened to this album before the club pick?
Yeah, I did right after the Super Bowl performance. And it was interesting. I mostly watched videos because I really liked his videos. And when I watched this most recently, I just went on YouTube, and like all those videos I had watched already. I didn't realize that I had listened to so much stuff from this album when I came to this.
What about you, Tim?
I have. I listened to it actually when I first encountered Kendrick Lamar. The night after the 2016 Grammy Awards, everybody was talking about his performance, and I just felt compelled, like I had to watch this thing. And I've watched it many times since. And that next day, I just watched it over and over again, and it was jaw dropping, and I had never seen anything like that on television before. It never would have showed up, when I was young, and I was an instant fan, and it just blew me away. And so I immediately went and listened to this album for the first time back then. And I listen to it periodically. I tend to listen more to Damn now than I do to any of his other albums, but there's some great stuff on this one too. There's a reason that it won 1 billion Grammy Awards.
What about you, Beckett?
No, I mean, I think the last hip hop album we listened to, I mentioned that I'm not much of a listener of that genre. So no, I hadn't. This was my first time.
All right. I have listened to this album before, and I listened to it earlier today. I kind of wish that I listened to it a little bit earlier in the month and then revisited it, because this album is very lyrically heavy. And so listening to the music and listening to the lyrics are like two different games.
Very dense. I mean, just listening to the music alone is dense enough.
Yes.
I would, what I did and what I would highly recommend you do is just go song by song and look up the lyrics online. They're readily available, and just read them. You can either read them while you're listening or just read them separately. And yeah, it's a pretty interesting experience.
Also, I always think it's really interesting that a couple of months back we did Thundercat, and like I noticed whenever Thundercat is on any of the tracks, like so many a variety of artists that are all very distinctly themselves on the songs that they appear on, all coming together to like kind of create something. Like this is an album by Kendrick Lamar, but it was really just like a collection of artists that I feel like it's not just them on the tracks. I think all of them work together to make each of these tracks, which I think is super interesting. Oh, I had to split up the track listings into 2 slides because of how many writers there are listed on each of them.
Was this considered a double album? This is a lot of music. I don't know if did it come out of LP initially?
And I think it did. I think it's about an hour long, but because all of the songs just like have so many samples in them or quotes from other songs or quotes from books, and just so many people on it, it was kind of hard for me to get the track listings. But what's everybody's favorite song? Just go back and forth between the two.
It's really hard on this album, but I mean, I have to go with I, just because of that's one of my favorite Isley Brothers tunes that they sampled. And so I guess. But I mean, there's easily 5 that I could say, oh no, it's this one. Oh no, it's that one. Oh no.
Yeah, I like You Ain't Gotta Lie, and I like King Kunta. My favorite part of the album, though, was the dialogue at the end. It's not really a song, but I loved it.
Oh my God, Fela Kuti. See, I should have read this.
Oh yeah.
Good Lord.
What about you, Tim?
I love Wesley's theory because the sound is so funkadelic. I put it on and I immediately hear funkadelic. That's that sound, and even for free has this very funkadelic kind of sound to it. But then there's the Blacker the Berry, which is just such an incredible piece of wordcraft. And maybe we'll get into a discussion about it as we go on. But yeah, those would be my two favorites for very different reasons.
Yeah, I mean, I don't exactly know where to start with this album. If I'm being completely honest, like how to start a discussion on it. I will say,
notes
like,
last night, if that helps. I have something kind of organized.
all right, I don't. This is an album that's very hard for me to like approach because it's insanely amazing from just a musical aspect. It's insanely amazing from a just craft perspective. It's like I said, it's an amazing mixing pot of a bunch of different styles and a bunch of different artists coming together. And I even like was thinking about this of like I don't exactly know how to like verbalize this in like a way, but this is one of those albums that I listened to and I was like everything about this is amazing, and it is absolutely not for me. Like the words he's saying is so out of my perspective as like a white European person that I'm just like, I am on the outside looking in. I am missing most of the things. I can't even like scratch the surface of the meaning of most of this stuff. And I am hyper aware of that listening to this.
Well, it's interesting you say that. Right before we came on, I was watching when he did this tour, he did an appearance on Austin City Limits of all things. And every crowd shot is like a bunch of white kids from UT. There's like hardly any black faces in the audience and they all know the lyrics. There's like, he's got I don't know, think of your favorite rock artist that, does Endless, having the audience sing the songs. He's doing that a ton on the tour for the album. The album couldn't have been out that long. And granted, it's a bunch of college kids who maybe have more time for that. But I was kind of stunned that A, there was almost no black faces in the crowd, and B, everybody was doing all kinds of lyric stuff. And the arrangements weren't the same as the album, and they were still catching the hits when he would give a vocal cue. It was I was amazed at the whiteness of it, of that audience.
Austin is the hippest town in Texas, and U of A is the very, very super blue liberal center of Texas.
Yeah, but it's not the black center of Texas. That's like Houston. So I just, there's a lot more black folks in Houston than there are in Austin. But I highly recommend that. It is really different than the record. It's mostly a live band, and there's very little samples. And so I don't know if that was his first tour for the record before the record started making a lot of money, or that's just the way he toured it. But it's a really interesting approach because it's very different. Like, your favorite band and you have your favorite album, you go see them and it's completely different. Anyway,
I'm actually am very interested in looking this up live. I really wanted to dive a little bit deeper, but I didn't quite have the time, and I really need to. A lot of times I wait until the end of the month for the club meetings because I'm like, I want it to be fresh in my head, and then I just don't have enough time to do all of the research I want to do. And I need to really be better about that. But no, this album, right out the gate, was popular.
Yeah, it was selling a lot. Yeah, I can imagine.
324,000 copies in its first week of release.
And it was number one its first week, right?
Yep.
I don't know how they measure number one anymore, but yeah. And then his first album was kind of, it didn't sell a lot, but he got a lot of good press, right? If I'm remembering it right.
Yeah. I think he's always been very popular in the rap community, and I think this kind of like opened the door to a wider audience.
Yeah. can see why.
Yeah.
Yeah, I loved how I don't know if it was just once or twice. I was trying to really pay attention to the lyrics. I was listening while I was working out. And that way I could focus on what was being said versus trying to multitask. And how he kept saying, I'm not political, or like some of the lyrics were like, I don't do politics, I'm not political, stuff like that. The entire album is political. I was like, all right, he's being funny.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of it is trying to explain things in a way that makes sense for him and his community.
Well, and I got a real sense of that experience. Like I will never know what it's like to, be a Black person raised in Compton or anything. Like I'm also, white passing and everything. So I have that experience as a white passing female, but being like listening to the album, I was really able to kind of like empathize with that experience and really kind of transport myself into that place and kind of get a sense for where he was coming from.
I wanted to say something about the lyrics and build on what Beckett is saying there, and that the lyrics, and again, I am not a lyric guy, and I'm just full disclosure, I don't know that much about rap, even though I was working in a record store when rap first hit. But what I noticed about the lyrics that I don't hear in a lot of rap or a lot of anything is that he's happy in dealing with complexity. The things that are great aren't 100% great. The things that are bad aren't 100% bad. And he's also kind of really honest with himself to the point where it seems like he's hard about himself, so that he's comfortable in complexity, both lyrically and obviously with the music. I mean, you don't even have to say it. There's just so much layers. The first note I had on my list of notes from last night was progressive rap, but he's dealing with difficult subjects, but he's dealing with them in a really how do you say, he's seeing the complexity in all of it, and all the good and the bad, and all the bad and the good, which is for me really, really rare, and I loved it.
What I find so interesting about him, and so admirable about him, is that he's not afraid to be self-critical. I don't think a lot of hip hop generally, and a lot of rap more specifically, is very ego-driven. Mm. And I do understand where that comes from. But with Kendrick, there's something different there. He's hard
on himself.
He's not afraid to examine himself, and he is just as critical of himself as he is of his community, which is one of the interesting things about The Black or the Berry. The most powerful moment for me in the lyric comes at the end, and I think I have it up here somewhere. A lot of it is a lot of it is very critical of Black culture, and one of the last verse, at the end of the last verse, here it is. So don't matter how much I say, I like to preach with the Panthers, or tell Georgia State Marcus Garvey got all the answers, or try to celebrate February like it's my B-day, or eat watermelon, chicken, and Kool-Aid on weekdays, or jump high enough to get Michael Jordan endorsements, or watch BET because urban support is important. And then this is the one that kills me. So why did I weep when Trayvon Martin was in the street, when gang banging made me kill a man blacker than me? Hypocrite. Mm-hmm. And he's saying, and what I take from that, he's saying, he's calling himself a hypocrite, but he's also referring to the culture from which he has arose, and how that's made him the hypocrite that he believes that he is. And I think at the same time, using Trayvon Martin, he is, whether intentionally or not, he's calling our entire society hypocritical, because we all, Black or not, so many of us wept at Trayvon Martin's death, but we don't do anything about it. I mean, we'll get up and we'll go and we'll get up and we'll protest and all that shit. But Sonia Maddox happened, what, 3 weeks ago? You know, and then I guess yesterday or something, another cop killed a black woman, shot her in the chest on a mental health check. They requested help from the police for a mental health check. And again, the black woman gets killed by a cop.
Yeah.
And so you know, we're hypocrites too. We weep for Trayvon Martin, but we don't do anything about the problem. Trayvon Martin's death was what, 15 years ago?
Yeah. Well, and then to expand on that, I also think that lyric was pointing out the hypocrisy in the fact that we do that and we protest, you know, these unjust killings that happen, but we don't do anything to address the systemic problems that are causing gangbanging in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I read out of that lyric.
And I think he actually talks about that a lot on this album, and a lot of the tracks he talks about that.
Yeah, he's from Compton, and I know that he was inspired to write this album after visiting South Africa, and he described it as him trying to explain what his experience was going to Africa to the people back, like the people in his hometown. And so there is a lot of this kind of like looking back at where you came from now that you have visited outside of it. That's kind of going on with it. But I think ultimately it is an album that he wrote almost for his hometown to try and explain his viewpoints back inward. And so there is like a lot of that kind of self-criticism, explaining the hypocrisy that he's finding in himself and his community. And I think that's also why there's so many different styles on it. It's an exploration of Black history and Black music history.
You know, it's interesting. You mentioned different styles. That I was just listening. He had a great interview with Rick Rubens on the Broken Record podcast. And he talked about, he discovered jazz like 3 months into the making of this album. And there's so much on here that is very, is referencing jazz in a lot of ways. And I think one of the producers, and maybe they're going to be I could look it up on Wikipedia, but one of the producers of the album mentioned that a lot of his references in terms of sound sources and chords were jazz. And then he went back and listened apparently at that point. And to me, there is a tremendous amount of jazz referencing on this album. I'm so bad with song titles. There was that, Tim, what was that?
You want me to bring it back up again?
Well, no, I can't remember. I just remember what it sounded like. I can't tell you what the title of the song was. Tim, what is that tune that has that really cool electric piano chord sequence? It's pretty much there the whole time.
You're gonna have to narrow it down.
Yeah. Anyway, so he's not super into jazz, but he's referencing jazz without knowing it. And then 3 months in the album, he sort of gets into that more deeply. And that is a really, he's a fast learner. I don't know how long it took him to put this album together, but no matter how long it took him, he's a fast learner because there's a really strong jazz influence on this album. And that's one of the things that I really like about it. And it's done in a really accessible way. So anyway.
I was just thinking about what Beckett was saying about the social criticism and how we're all responsible. And Wesley's Theory talks a lot about that. I won't read any of the lyrics off of that one, but Wesley's Theory and I think For Free had a bit of that as well, of going outside the Black community and pointing out that society in general is responsible for these problems that we have. And I don't know that that's news to anybody except maybe people in the South who aren't really empathetic to, what's going on in cities like Compton anyway.
Well, I think there's a lot of what's the word I'm looking for? Willful ignorance, like all over the place, even in places that are diverse. Like a lot of, like growing up in LA, like all I ever heard was, we're a melting pot, everyone belongs here. But that's not true. Like and then they would in the very next sentence say, but don't ever go to Compton because you'll get shot. It's like, okay, are you guys not seeing the problem with your language here?
I haven't listened to a lot of Kendrick Lamar's earlier albums, but I did read like a lot of reviews for To Pimp a Butterfly, and one of the things that they talked about was how this is more of a like addressing Black society, where like before this it was just like all kind of Compton based, which is what a lot of rappers did and kind of perpetuated that stereotype, and then they wanted to create that kind of stereotype. And this is much broader and much more I'm finding a hard time finding the right words because I want to find the right words, but I am not as good with words as Kendrick Lamar is. So
no, I see what you're saying, because like this is very, it's not so place specific, and he does talk about, you know, all over the place. He doesn't just talk about LA or Compton. He talks about the whole country, and he talks about Africa, and he talks about these broader systemic issues that are far reaching beyond any borders.
Yeah, it's a story that's very similar in so many places in America.
Definitely in America. In other places too.
In other places too.
Hey, Rebecca, I also wanted to talk about him as a visual artist. And it first came up in my notes where I was saying like some of these layerings and sort of like songs that do a complete 180 in the middle of nowhere is kind of cinematic, you know, like where there's a change of scene and you go from you're in your bedroom at home and then all of a sudden there's these huge vistas out in nature. And also like again, I mentioned that I was drawn to his videos right after seeing him on the Super Bowl, and the videos are really, I think, really visually interesting. And I can't imagine that's only whoever the video director is. I think he probably has a lot to do with that. And I think he's a natural visual artist because he's doing that cinematic stuff within the songs. Like there's more than one song where there are these part of the reason I mentioned that it was kind of progressive rap, and that there would be like this song and it's cruising along, and then all of a sudden it's just like, whoa, we're in a completely different place, really almost instantly. The bottom drops out or what have you. But I think for me, a lot of that is when I hear that in music, and he's not the only person that does that, but I just think it's a real cinematic approach to arranging music. And then the other thing about, you know, how there's a really good eye in all the videos that he does, a really unique point of view that you don't see in videos. Not that I watch his videos.
I brought up the listing of personnel on this because I thought there was a really interesting note in the liners that they bring up, and then I quickly realized that you probably can't read anything because of how many goddamn people there were on this album. But Kendrick Lamar is listed as vocals and art direction. And I thought that was just a really interesting note from because this album does feel like, unlike like a lot of more modern albums that feel like a collection of songs, this is much closer to not a concept album, but like a complete work. And that includes like a lot of the performances he did on the sides for it, the music videos that go along with it. I do think that he had a hand in every aspect of it to create this as like a piece of work.
Yeah.
It did feel more like listening to like one long story versus like separate songs.
Yeah, there were times where it felt like it should have been a track switch and it wasn't, and then other times where it felt like it shouldn't have been a track switch but it was. which kind of creates like this new way to package up like little parts of it. I was trying to find information on the recording times for it, and then I just kept getting distracted.
Oh, Pharrell makes an appearance.
I think as a producer.
And vocals.
Oh, and vocals. Yeah, the names just keep coming.
Yeah.
I was just thinking, in some ways, it reminds me of the way it's structured. It reminds me of Kerouac's On the Road. It's that kind of. It's a musical novel. It's a stream of consciousness musical novel. You know, which is why a lot of rap albums tend to be like that. You know, I've listened to. You know, I don't listen to it all the time, but when I do, I have a hard time picking out individual tracks from the rest of the album, because you typically don't have the music tends to be more static, and you don't have a repetition necessarily, like a chorus verse structure. It's just this stream of consciousness thing. And so for me, growing, and I'm assuming for all of us, for the music that we grew up on, where we're more used to this very structured form, it's harder to grab onto individual ideas within an entire album. You know, if I didn't fall in love with the content of the first track and of The Black of the Berry and All Right, I probably wouldn't have been able to tell you what those tracks were named. I can only do that because I sought those tracks out in particular.
I can't find anything about how long it took him to make, but he did travel to South Africa in 2012. He revealed his plans to release a follow-up to the album in 2014, and this album was released in 2015. It was also recorded at so many different studios.
Yeah, it's all over the place.
It's all over the place. So maybe 2-3 years. There's also an album that he released afterwards, Untitled Unmastered. That is a compilation album of the songs that didn't make the cut. So I imagine that starting in 2012, he just was writing constantly, and then there was like a year-long creation process to put everything together as an album.
I think Good Kid, Mad City came out in 2010. He's one of those guys who I think he's like, you know, Bruce Springsteen carries around this big notebook that he's constantly writing lyrics in, and so does Dylan. And I think that's what Kendrick Lamar does. I think he's always writing, you know.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I remember reading about the South Africa trip that he set aside, quote unquote, 2 to 3 albums worth of tracks when he came back, because he said, okay, we're not going to do that. We're going to do this. So, yeah, I imagine he's got a ton of stuff going on. And you know, Tim, I wanted to build on your point about the structures that he uses. And for me, this kind of rap is, I can sort of get into it better because there are structures, there are hooks, there are things that repeat, right? And going back to the beginnings of rap, when it started, that there weren't even choruses and hooks at the beginning. And I remember we would talk about, you know, rap would sell a lot better if it had a hook, even if you just repeated one of your lyrics at some point, right? And also thinking about like where popular music is now, with some exceptions, this is so much more complex and dense, and just full of information than most popular music right now. I say most, not all. And which is like a complete 180 from when rap started out, and people who weren't part of that culture like had trouble with it because there was just so little there. It was just, you know, the words and a beat, and in some cases not a heck of a lot more than that, and which was awesome, but it was really hard for me to get my head around it. But with an album like this, I can remember songs because there's structures and there's melodic information and there's hooks and there's things that are repeated. And I was really able to sink my teeth into this in ways that I struggle with some other rap.
Mm. Yeah, I remember I was in high school when Sugar Hill Gang's record came out, Rapper's Delight. And it's so funny. We all knew all the lyrics to that track. But what was funny was rap wasn't really new at that point. Nora. Shh. But I was not. I was in the 70s. I was listening to funk and soul and that kind of thing. And then after Nora, stop.
She has things to say.
But after Rapper's Delight, I didn't really hear much going on in rap. Maybe it was what I was listening to, what stations I was listening to. But then Straight Outta Compton came out, and really that's my baseline for rap, and that, and It Takes a Nation of Millions, and those seem so superficial. And I don't mean that they're superficial records, but in comparison to what Kendrick Lamar is doing, the level of sophistication that is going on there, the interiorness of it, how it looks inside, how he looks inside himself, how he looks inside his culture, whereas something like Straight Outta Compton feels all external, describing things that are going on, but not really looking too deeply into what the causes of those things are. And I think that's that's the big contribution that I think Kendrick Lamar makes to the genre, says the white guy, the privileged white guy, is that he brings a level of lyrical sophistication that we have just never seen, not just in this genre, but not since, the great singer-songwriters of the late 60s and the 70s. He's just so sharp. There's a reason he has a Pulitzer Prize.
I think it's also really musically sophisticated too. I can't say that he would be able to, play some of the tougher jazz chords on a piano, but what he's putting together is really, to me, really musically sophisticated and interesting to listen to. And even if I think about, hip hop bands that I like a lot, like The Roots, I think he's like a pretty big level above them, and they're wonderful.
I don't know his influences, but he's definitely preceded in that musical sophistication by artists like Madlib, who was already doing this fusion of jazz and hip hop. The jazz influence isn't as heavy on this, I think, as the stuff that Madlib is doing, but definitely the Madlib and his corral of artists that he's associated with definitely had a part into integrating those sounds, I think.
Can we talk about this album cover?
We've never looked that closely at it.
Yeah, I could not make it out on my phone when I was listening, but there's a lot going on here.
Yeah, I actually can't find a lot of information on it, or like I said, in the short amount of time that I actually was doing research. But I do want to know more about what was going on.
Yeah. What is the inspiration? Who is that judge? Is that Alito?
I don't know who that is on the bottom, but one of the major themes, and again, I've went through and I've read all the lyrics, so I've been able to get a better sense of them than I would have if I just listened to the album. But one of the themes is how money has, in the way that money and the need for material things, how that has fucked up Black culture, and it seems strange to say that because I would argue that money fucks up every culture, but that's not what Kendrick is concerned with. He's concerned with how money and materialism has destroyed the communal nature of Black culture and Black cities like Compton, all across the nation. Again, that's a privileged white guy's take on it, but that's what, reading the lyrics, that's what I see there. They're all holding stacks of money, and I think that's what that is. That seems to be a big theme of the album, and I think that's what whoever did the cover, that was probably his instruction to show that kind of theme.
Well, compositionally, it's not 100 miles away from the Sgt. Pepper album with all the faces in the middle and stuff. I wonder if it's the Compton version of that.
I'm listening to him explain it.
Yeah, it's definitely trying to tell a story, and I'm very curious what that is.
They're all family friends from his childhood, and he wanted to take them around the world. So he wanted to take his family places, or his friends and family places.
There's more to it than that, though.
I'm still watching. I'm sorry.
Oh, you're doing it live. Well, there you go.
I'm just going to put a quote to it because it's too hard for me to manage things.
It's pretty amazing.
I'm also with the White House in the background. I'm also reminded of the government conspiracy to bring crack into Black neighborhoods and use the funds to support the Nicaraguan Contras in the the Banana Republic Wars that Reagan was involved in. That was that whole scandal with the Reagan administration and Oliver North and those cats about how they were selling crack in Black communities in order to use the funds to support the Contras.
The direct quote revolving around this that it seems that people like to talk about the most is, "It represents those without money of my color that are rich in spirit. You don't need dollars to feel like you have a place in the world."
Interesting. I wouldn't have taken that from this image.
That was Kendrick Lamar's own words.
There you go.
Yeah, not what I take from it either.
I would have to spend some time with the image and listen to that interview.
Yeah.
But he's not political.
I also think that, like, in all of his words and everything and all of his criticism, there is like a sense of hopefulness about it a lot. And like, I'm not surprised to hear him say that these are all his family friends who are rich in spirit and he wanted to show them the world. And it is kind of, in a very optimistic sense, what the album is about. It's about learning about yourself and taking this culture that they exist in and allowing them to exist in the world with their culture, as opposed to just shutting it down constantly.
Yeah, well, and I think that the whole album threads together very much as, you know, these social commentaries and things, and it kind of leaves you feeling a little bit bleak until you get to the end. And then there's the last, I can't remember if it was the very last track that was like a very uplifting song, and then the dialogue at the end, which I loved so much, that was like, you know, well, where do we go from here? And like talking about the future of the culture and things like that, and like passing the torch from the previous generation to the next. And that was a very hopeful note to end on.
Yeah, every time that I've ever watched an interview with Kendrick Lamar, he strikes me as somebody that is ultimately a positive person. And like, he's thinking very introspectively, but he is hopeful about the future, and he's working towards trying to make that future better for everybody.
Yeah.
That's his main goal. And I think he does bring like a lot of Black American culture to the foreground, and not in a necessarily like It's an album that absolutely is like an ode to all of Black music history, and just wanting to bring it to the foreground and wanting to exist in the world the way that everybody should, without changing themselves.
Beckett, are you talking about the part where he talks about the butterfly and the caterpillar?
Sure. I don't remember.
Yeah.
I listened to it a couple of days ago and I'm already distracted. But no, maybe it was just on my version. I listened on YouTube Music, and there's like a spoken track between him and another artist who I think in the concept is supposed to be his dad, but is like a predecessor in like rap music line of succession or something. I don't remember.
I want to say it's like the very end of I.
Is it? Yeah, I don't.
But I am also blanking.
Well,
But yeah, the conversation is very much about like the future of rap and Black culture in general, and just like where do we go from all of this history that we have accumulated that has been so, destructive. How do we break free of that? What do we do? And so it's like the dialogue between the two of them talking about this, and then it turns from like a very kind of bleak beginning to a hopeful ending, and then it's implied that the father figure dies at the end, so it's kind of left up to you, the next generation.
But Becca, you're saying that, and I didn't make it that far into the album at 78 minutes. Sorry, guys. But you're saying it gave a sense of uplift at the end,
yeah,
or a vision for something positive. And
yeah.
I think that lines up with the way he handles complexity on like in a sort of more of a micro sense in terms of the lyrics of a particular song. Like when he's talking about hard stuff, it's not all hard. And when he's talking about happy stuff, it's not all happy. And I think that's the hallmark of a great human and a great artist. And I was just last time I saw my daughter, I was playing for her a Neil Finn tune that is like from 20 years ago, but it's all about the Me Too movement. And at the end, the last verse is a complete sort of musical 180, and it shows a vision of a world past that, which I thought was, Neil Finn's probably 40 years older than Kendrick, but it was like a real, how do you say, mature level of thinking. And it was also great for the listener because you're just not stuck in the muck and, everything is awful and that's it, and then the album ends, right? It was just sort of like, yes, all this Me Too stuff is awful, and here's a vision for what, relationships between men and women could be. And then it ends on that higher note. So it sounds, what you're saying, Beckett, is he's kind of ending the album on a higher note.
Yeah. Well, and because like you're saying, like it feels very, I don't know, this listening to a lot of this album made me angry, and not the music itself, but like I have a very strong sense of social justice, and so it made me angry, the stuff that he was talking about, for not for him, but like just broader in general, our world, our system, what we've done. I don't want to get into it, but and so listening to the whole thing, and it's a great workout music, like it worked really well, but then this sense of uplifting and hopefulness at the end with the last couple tracks, like just it brought the whole thing together.
Yeah.
So you're not just listening to angry music and then being angry.
I thought it was really funny. I can't get back to it now, but like when I was looking it up on Spotify, they always tell you like playlists, and it's just like the playlist was literally like workout beast mode. And then like the next one, it was like soft jazz. You can find some of his songs on both of these things. Is
There you go.
very
He
funny.
confused the algorithm. There you go. What more is there to like about the guy?
Yeah, he's also like on a bunch of other people's tracks. He's getting around the music industry and kind of in a way changing it for the better. I think he did open the door for, because I mean, he's not the first by a long shot to say these things in rap music, but he was somebody who put it into words that people heard. And I think it really opened a door for a lot of the album and for a lot of people listening to rap. And I think it made rap something that people didn't just scoff at immediately. I think between him and like Childish Gambino kind of opened the door a lot. We are also coming up on an hour. So I do want to make sure that we get through talking points that everybody wants to talk through. I don't want to. Miguel actually took notes because he is a responsible club member.
I covered all my
Unlike
notes.
me.
Thank you. Responsible club member.
I don't know whether
No higher praise than being called a responsible club member.
I don't know if everybody saw, but I posted a link to the 2016 Grammys performance. I really highly recommend it. I think it will blow you away.
And I'll also include the link in the comments for the stream.
Yeah.
So that it's not just a secret link.
Yeah, so you out there can watch it too.
Yeah. It's whoever just brought up Childish Gambino. I was thinking about that today. Because I always go back to his "This Is America," one of my favorite videos of like forever, and that it's different, but it's similar. I can see a thematic relationship between the two.
Yeah. I was actually, while I was listening to this album, if my workout were to continue when this ended, I was going to put that on.
Yeah.
I would be surprised because I
I
have to assume that you started the album at the start of your workout and you're like, all right, time to keep going after an hour.
Yeah, it was perfect timing. Like I as soon as because I go for a walk, I go to the park and I work out and then I come back. And as soon as I like got up to my building, the album was done. So I was like, oh, great. That was the perfect length.
Going back over the lyrics briefly, I think when you were talking about the discussion, I think it was the very end of the last song, Mortal Man. And I believe he was trying to talk to Tupac because it ends with Pac.
Yeah.
Oh, Pac. I heard Pop.
Okay. Yeah. Also, the title of this album initially was supposed to be To Pimp a Caterpillar. As a sort of like nod to Tupac, which is what that would turn into. But he really liked the idea of butterfly and pimp being in the same sentence and kind of the juxtaposition of it. So he changed it.
Well, and butterfly is the next level of the caterpillar. So
it's true. Were there any final notes that we wanted to discuss tonight, or are we looking to close out the meeting?
I just had two thoughts because we've been staring at this credits list for the last few songs.
Oh, sorry.
He's credited the drummer, Ronald Bruner. He had some great drummers on this. And so Complexion is credited to Duckworth, Bruner, Spears. Spears, I'm assuming is Aaron Spears.
I can look that up because will block it out.
What that says to me is that was a jam session where he's crediting everybody who was in the jam session. Or I'm sorry, it could very well be when I see something like that where a drummer is getting credited like that and a drummer that I don't know of having any songwriting credits, that usually means there was a jam session, everybody contributed, and the way they handled the credits is they all got credit for, being there while the jam session happened. And so I'm wondering, and I'm truly wondering, I'm not saying this happened, but I could easily imagine a lot of those tracks coming out of improvisation, which is a very jazz thing, of course. And I think that's cool. But I'm, how do you say, projecting.
I kind of always imagined that this album was like a mix of beats that were made and then mixed with other things, and like almost like things other people had done being all combined together. It could have been like a jam session, but the like props to the drummer, because we didn't really get into it, but the rhythms in this album are just like insane.
It's
Like
drummers. There's many great drummers on this album.
Yeah,
but there's a lot of live. Just speaking from the drum set point of view, there was a lot of live on here, and even the stuff that's programmed is they're trying to make it sound live like a human did it. You know what I mean? And that's another thing I didn't get a chance to say, but that's something I really, really like. That tons and tons of live drumming, and then the stuff that is sequenced is sort of, they're trying to make it sound like live.
It was probably finger drumming when it's sequenced kind of deal. So finger drummed and then looped is kind of how I imagined it. But I've talked in the past about, especially when we did Devo, about how loose Devo is in terms of like, what is the timing? Like I never know exactly where we are in the beat, but the thing is, there's a lot of songs on this album where I don't know where we are on the beat, but it's so much more sophisticated and an entirely different vibe. With Devo, it was like so off-putting, and with Here, I'm just kind of like, oh, we're at 1, and then like I'm like counting, and then I'm like, wait 1 second, I'm at 1.
I could do a whole other hour on that. So I heard a lot of what drummers call metric modulation, but like, rhythms on the top of rhythms. That's very West African, even though he went to South Africa. It's a very West African thing. And I had this insight that I have to run by people who know more about that music than me, that West African music, there's definitely these beats and then these chants over the beats. But when you hear a drummer, quote unquote, soloing, like the lead djembe player soloing, he's really backing up a dancer. And I'm thinking, I have a theory now that this metric modulation thing came up naturally when a drummer's trying to support a dancer, and dancers can't, the way the human body moves, if you want to do interesting moves, it's not always going to be straight to the beat. It's going to be kind of elliptical in and around the beat, And so I wrote that down as another, PhD dissertation I could write, which is the effect of accompanying dancers and how that relates to a rhythm, if you're trying to be literal about it. But going back to this album, there's a ton of implied rhythms and metric modulation all over the place. And some of the things that don't seem connected are kind of connected, but really, really loosely, because he's really comfortable with that. And that's a very, very West African thing.
Yeah, it makes sense. It's something that I feel like we should talk about at some point in time, because I always think that's really fascinating. And I've always thought it was really fascinating because I used to play in the pit orchestra for an opera, and we would have some form of that because of the singers, or in case people didn't get to like a point on stage in time, we were like changing things for their movements. And I think like, I don't have a background in like any African music whatsoever, so I can really only relate it back to my classical training. But like something that's built around a dancer, around movement, circus does it all the time.
Oh my God, I've got the best Cirque du Soleil video of the drummer for, I forget the name of the show, but he got interviewed and he brought the background, what do you call it? The music director talking to everybody in the band while the act is going on. And they just get this 3 and bouge, and then you just go to the next section no matter where you are in the music. And it's just totally amazing because everything sounds like it's put together, and it's really the band watching and being able to change on a dime, just like, and the landing is now, and then we go off to this other thing. But to hear all the things going on in the background, where the music director's talking to the drummer and everybody's just getting these cues that the audience doesn't hear, it's really fascinating.
Yeah,
But I digress. It's 8 o'clock.
Yeah, we're going to end up talking about that for a very long time if we keep going. So I think I'm going to close out the meeting unless anybody has final thoughts.
if anybody's interested, I added a link to the playlist that I created. It's about 7 hours of jazz hip hop fusion.
You should put it in the Facebook group.
Did you say
Yes.
7 hours?
7 hours. It's a 7 hour long playlist. Yes. It's got Mad Lib and Tribe Called Quest and Us Three and all that kind of stuff.
Oh, that's right. Didn't we do a Tribe Called Quest album on here?
We
did.
did.
They had some real jazzy, cool stuff too. Ron Carter.
Um,
I talked
on
to
that
him.
note, we'll include all these links that Tim is talking about in the comments for the live stream. But I think I'm going to close out the call on that note. So
Watch the 2016 Grammys video. I swear to God, it'll blow you away.
yeah, we'll have our movie club talking about Millennium Actress on Wednesday, and I will be announcing new picks on Thursday. So keep an eye out for that, and I will talk to you all later.
Thanks for watching.
Bye.